Growing Up White. It's Weird. Book 1, Chapter 6. Mom. My mother. Now, what I could tell you about my mother would easily fill up a whole book, but I'll just give you some of the highlights. Now, just so you know, my mother is no longer with us. I mean, she's dead. I didn't call the chapter Mom is Dead like the Dad is Dead because it didn't feel right, especially since I'm recording this on what would have been her 89th birthday, December 14th, 2023. She died June 14th, 2020, and she was born December 14th, 1934, right after the Great Depression and right before World War II. And as I mentioned before, birth is really not celebrated because we don't know who that person will become, if they're going to grow up and become a scientist or an engineer and make new discoveries or create new computers or some social media, or they're going to be a famous actor or a musician, some kind of rock star, some kind of concert violinist, or some kind of famous pianist, or anything like that, or even a serial killer or a dictator who tries to take over the world. We just don't know. And when you think about the way we were born, it's kind of strange because you need two different creatures, man and a woman, to get together and create a single creature. But if you lose one of those original creatures, you could essentially become extinct. Your species become extinct. Now, humans have done that to other species, not their own yet. In celebration of recording this on my mother's birthday, I'm going to tell you some things about her. My mother did want me to be a doctor. Now, that's common for parents. They want their child to be some kind of professional. So, after graduating high school and working for a few years, I went to a community college, Delaware County Community College. Oh, maybe 20 minutes from where I lived, just outside of Philadelphia. If you don't know what a community college is, it's a 2-year college where you can get a degree in all kinds of specialties. Mine just happened to be science because that is what would be required to become a doctor. You need some kind of science degree. So I got my degree in natural science. When I was at the college, I remember one student saying, community college is just high school with ashtrays. Basically, it was the early 80s and students did smoke and you could walk around smoking, but not in the classrooms. And I thought, wait a minute, at my high school, you were allowed to smoke. You see, they had a smoking lounge. No, it wasn't like a teacher's lounge where it's a private room with chairs and ashtrays. You can go hang out and smoke. No, it was an area between the two main buildings in the courtyard off to the side where students could smoke, catch a smoke between classes. Another thing about my high school was you didn't have to go a full day of school. You see, depending on what your guidance counselor thought was best for you, and believe me, they were kind of clueless. If you were deemed smart enough to go to college, they would have you take college-type classes. Or if they thought you were going to be more of a worker, they would recommend something called VOTEC, Vocational Technical Training. That's what I got into. My first year, 10th grade, I applied for VOTEC. And of course, the classes that most kids wanted was some kind of data input entry computer class, and the cool guys who would want to get carpentry or masonry or some kind of automotive class. I didn't get any of those. And then there was art design, which I really wanted because I was good at art, but I didn't get that. I ended up getting cooking, which really was perfect for me. So in the morning, I would get up early, walk 20 minutes, 7 a.m., get on a bus. It would take about 35, 40 minutes to get there after we picked all the kids up. And I would spend the morning learning how to cook. And then in the afternoon, I would go to school. The second year, I got cooking again, but it was at a different place and it was in the afternoon. So I would go to school in the morning, get on the bus, and then go to another training center. After class, they would drop us off back at school. Then I'd go home. When I finally did get a car, not some kind of special car like, one kid in school had a Corvette, I would drive that afternoon, sometimes with friends, to the VOTEC training and then drive back. Now, here's the thing about that time. We had 8-track tapes. I don't know why they invented 8-track tapes, but what they were full albums recorded onto this little tape in a box, and you would have an 8-track tape player. At home, our stereo had an 8-track tape player, AM/FM radio, and a turntable. And it was Panasonic with these really cool modular speakers. So what we would do so we could listen to music in the car, cassettes just weren't out yet, or I couldn't afford one. We would take a little cheap 8-track tape player, put it under the seat, take a wire it into the fuse box, hook up some speakers in the back, pop in the 8-track, and we could hear our music while in the car. The only weird thing about an 8-track is, as it got to the end of the tape, it needed to flip over. Sometimes it would be in the middle of a song, so it would fade the song out, pause, go to the next side, and fade the song back in, and then play the rest of the album. That was kind of weird, but we got used to it. And then my third year of high school, senior year, I wanted to work. So I had all these years of cooking training, and as you remember, I was a dishwasher at 12 years old, so I had experience working in kitchens. So I applied and got to work at a local restaurant. The restaurant was in an area called Ridley Park, and Ridley Park was a little more upscale than where we were. We were middle class. It was a little higher, maybe bordering upper middle class. So it was a local restaurant owned by one guy. And by the way, he turned out to be a pedophile, but I wasn't molested by him. So I applied, and I didn't get in as a cook. I started as a dishwasher. Now, I did have a lot of experience being a dishwasher. Back when I was 12 years old, at the restaurant at the Holiday Inn where my mother worked, here's how we wash dishes. A busboy would bring in the dirty dishes in some kind of container, hand it to the one person. The one guy would take the glasses and stack them in a rack above him, take the dishes and wipe off any food, and then hand me the dish. And I would take the dish and I would put the dish in a rack vertical, move it over to a hose where I'd spray off any food, then move it into the dishwashing machine, which is about 8 feet long. It's like a conveyor belt, it's kind of like a car wash. It would take it through, wash it, rinse it, and then the guy on the other end would take the clean dishes and stack them in another rack, and then as needed, take a bunch of plates over to the cooks. I got to do all of those positions, from handing the dishes to stacking the dishes and taking the clean dishes. So I knew how to wash dishes. But at this local restaurant that this guy owned, when I got into the kitchen on my first day, I looked around, I didn't see a dishwashing machine. Now, some smaller places have a smaller dishwashing machine, and it's a single one where you take your rack, push it in, close the doors, it would wash it, rinse it, and you would take it out and then stack the dishes. No, they didn't have a dishwashing machine. The dishwashing machine, I found out, was me. Yes, they had a double sink. I would wash on one side, rinse on the other, and then stack the dishes. Here's a little white weirdness for you. My fake cousin, a year older than me, worked at that restaurant as a cook. And let me tell you this, if you like eating at a restaurant, it's best not to know what goes on in the kitchen, because what you see might not be too pleasant. That's not all restaurants, but the ones I worked at, there were some strange things going on. You know, just the nature of the business. Okay, so in a kitchen, there is food, and food attracts different kinds of creatures. And some of those creatures, bugs and flies. And what they would do in a kitchen is have these little strips that hung about 2 feet down from the ceiling, and it would be a sticky substance with some kind of scent. The flies would land on that, get stuck and die. And you would see these around the ceilings. It was very common in restaurants. But what my fake cousin liked to do, he would like to try to catch flies with his hand, and he got good at it. Then he would take the fly, throw it into the deep fryer. Yes, the very deep fryer where he would cook French fries and any kind of breaded food, and he would watch the fly pop. That was his thing. Yeah, a little bit of white weirdness there. And what the owner would like to do is take some of the employees, the boy employees, up to his cabin for a weekend or week to kind of give him a little treat for working. Yeah, I found out that he was having his own little treat with the boys. And no, luckily, I was not one of them. That job only lasted for one semester. And then the next semester, I worked at a local supermarket where my father worked as a grocery clerk. Now, my father basically had two jobs. He was in the Army, and he worked at the grocery store as a clerk. And grocery clerks were making good money at the time because they were in the union. So we always had something nice, whether it be food or clothing or cars, because he worked, he made good money. And my mother, of course, she was a nurse, she was making good money, so we were doing okay. And I worked in the bakery because I got good at making cakes. Initially, I was inspired by my fake aunt. You see, she bought these cake pans, certain molds that were shaped like characters, and then you would decorate it. It was all by a company called Wilton. They had pans, they had tubes, they had colors, they had little tips that did these cool things like make flowers and make leaves and make certain designs. And I learned how to do that. Then I took it to another level, but that's for another chapter. So I worked in this bakery because they wanted to do specialty cakes. So I was brought on to do specialty cakes. And then eventually they trained me to work in all positions at the bakery. For example, I learned how to make donuts. It's a big deep frying machine, and you would take this kind of other machine and you would squirt these little round circles into it. Then you would flip the donuts over in the grease, and then you would take them out and let them dry. You put sugar or icing or whatever on them, and you would make donuts. Speaking of donuts, my mother, in many of her jobs, worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and she would bring home a dozen donuts just about every day or maybe every week. And she would bring home all kinds of donuts. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts had maybe 30, 40 types of donuts, and she would bring home a dozen or 2 dozen of a variety of donuts. And one of the things she did that was really cool was the cream-filled donuts. You see, when you make donuts like jelly or custard or cream-filled, you take the donut itself and you shove it onto this point, which is hooked up to the cream or the filling, and you push a button and it squirts in once. Well, my mother would do more than one squirt. She would do 2, 3, 4, till those cream-filled donuts were so large. Oh, they were so good. And my mother would do this at all her jobs. She would bring something home. When she worked at an airline, she worked again in the food department where they would prepare meals for the planes. She would bring home food that they didn't use, but also my mother would bring home silverware. And I remember eating dinner, looking at the silverware, and it said TWA on it. And I thought to myself, wow, they're giving my mother silverware. But what I really think was going on, my mother and some of her other co-workers were borrowing things from where they worked and bringing them home, borrowing them permanently. So besides silverware from TWA, I remember some of her towels said Hilton on them. Then there was one place where my mother and her co-workers were being scrutinized, and security would be checking their purses. Now, ladies back then had these huge purses, so they'd carry everything in it. And what they would do is take some things, put it in there, and bring them home. Security started checking their purses. And what my mother said one of the ladies did is put a used Kotex in her purse. And after that, they stopped checking all the ladies' bags. Now, if you don't know what a Kotex is, what it is this. Now, since I worked at my father's supermarket and I had a mother, I would sometimes buy my mother Kotex pads. It's no big deal. There's movies where they have scenes and it's kind of funny where the guy's buying a feminine hygiene product, and he's kind of embarrassed, but I didn't care. It was just a Kotex pad, and it was for my mother. So what it is, it's a pad. It's about 6 inches long and about 2 or 3 inches wide and about 1 inch high. And it's a soft pad, and a woman puts it on her vagina during her menstruation, and it catches the blood, and that's basically it. Then the woman takes it and throws it out. Well, my mother would take hers and throw it in the trash in the bathroom, and we would see it there, and I learned about menstruation and Kotex pads and how that works. But our dog, Sam, and oh, by the way, we did have a dog. My mother got him, even though my father didn't want us to have a dog. She got a little puppy one night, and Sam was mixed between a German Shepherd and a Terrier, and Sam was great. I loved him. But what Sam would do is he would go into the trash, get my mother's Kotex pad and chew it up, and we would find chewed up Kotex pad around the house. Yeah, white weirdness. Oh, and Sam would also eat my father's black socks and then poop them out whole. I would find them in the yard. So back to the bakery. In the supermarket where my father worked, I learned how to make donuts and other things. I did some specialty cakes. But here's a little weird thing I remember, and I don't know why this happened. The manager, who was maybe 4 or 5 years older than me, he started bullying me. I would go back and grab some flour in another room, and he would come back and start hitting me. I don't know why he did that. It was like a little wrestling thing. He would wrestle with me. I didn't want to do it, but he was my boss, so I didn't say anything. And then the other guy who worked there, he did a little bit of that, but not much. And then after a while, I decided I had enough, and I quit. He didn't like that. He got mad, but I left. My father was disappointed, but I never told anybody about the bullying that was going on. But I had enough, so I quit. And I went and worked at another bakery for a master baker. I said master baker. This guy was from Germany, and he grew up learning to be a master baker. His name was Rolf, and he was German. He had a German accent. He opened his own bakery, and I worked there for about 6 months doing cakes and then learning other bakery techniques and making all the bakery items. And one time, he brought up Adolf Hitler. Yes, that Adolf Hitler. Since you're working there in close quarters, you would just have conversations. And Rolf, in conversation, went on to talk about all the great things Adolf Hitler had done for the German people. And so he was a pro-Adolf Hitler German. And eventually, I left that job and started my own cake business, which will be for another chapter. Okay, so back to community college. I get my 2-year degree with honors in natural science. And I really liked the classes. Calculus, I wasn't so good at. Physics, I was good at. I mean, I got B's and A's and maybe a C or two, but that was fine. So I got my degree, and then I thought, okay, now let's go on to a university. Back in the Philadelphia area, popular universities are Penn, which is very well known. I think it even might be Ivy League. Temple University, the College of Arts, and then out on the main line, you have St. Joe's and Villanova, which has a basketball team. I think they usually go to tournaments. And then my university, Widener University. Now, you probably have not heard of it. However, it's a real university. At one time, it was Pennsylvania Military College, and then it became Widener College, and then Widener University. It has its own law school. It has its own restaurant school. So technically, it's the only college or university with a bar right on campus. So I went to Widener University. It was about maybe 15 minutes away, so I could commute during the daytime, come home, and make my specialty cakes. When you first go to a university, you meet with, again, some kind of guidance counselor, a professor, and they ask you what you want to do. And I say, well, my mother would like me to be a doctor, so I'll study science, and I'll be a pre-med major. Now look, there is no such thing as a pre-med degree. You get a degree in some kind of science, biology, chemistry, anything like that. And the school I was going to, Widener, was known for engineering, and nursing. So the first year I take a bunch of science classes, and one I liked was physiology and anatomy, where we dissected a mink. But it was already dead, so we got to learn about how a body is put together. And then one time they had this opportunity where you could go to the local morgue and see a dead body. What would happen is you would get a call in the morning from either the professor or one of the students, and you would call another student, until they got enough students to go to the morgue in the morning and see the fresh dead body. I ended up not going. So I was basically a good student. One professor said to me, pretty much a solid B student. And I said, okay, that works for me. So I studied science for 2 years, and then I meet with my counselor, my professor, and he tells me there is no such thing as a pre-med degree. You have to take a certain field of study. And I said, okay, well, what should I take? And he says, well, you could take chemistry or biology, and it'll take you at least 2 more years to graduate. And I thought, oh, I did 2 years of community college. I did 2 years here. What can I get in a year? And he looks and he looks and he looks. He says, okay, if you double up on classes, you can graduate in 1 year with an English degree. And I said, I'm there. Best decision of my life. Now, of course, my mother is disappointed because her son is not going to be a doctor. Well, not yet. I did take the MCATS test, which is a medical, some kind of admission test, and I did poorly on it. However, I did get an interview at a medical school. You see, my mother worked at a hospital that was associated with a medical school. This was the college or medical school of osteopathy. Osteopathy is just the same as regular medical school. Doctors go on to become surgeons and work in every kind of field, general practice, dermatology, cardiology, all the medical fields. They just have a DO at the end of their name. I get an interview and I bring the pictures of the cakes I've done. And they say, these are great, but you didn't do well on the MCATS test, which is your medical college admission test. So we don't think medical school is for you. And that was the end of my mother's dream of wanting me to become a doctor. However, she decided maybe I should be a lawyer. I mean, my university had its own law school, so I took the LSAT test. It's a law school admission test, and I didn't do well on that either. So here I am, 25. I graduated from college and university with my English degree, plus I had my associate's degree and my specialty cake business, trying to decide what to do with my life. I did think about performing. You see, the last year at the university, when I declared English major, I wrote for the paper. I was in a play called You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I thought I should be Snoopy. I dressed in black and white for the audition, but I got Schroeder. Snoopy went to a seasoned professional non-student theater performer, and then the other kids in the play were mostly nursing students, had also been in theater before. And they would walk around singing all these theater songs. And I was clueless about what they were doing, but I felt, part of it. So I got to play Schroeder in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And I thought about, well, maybe do some theater. I tried that, but that didn't work. Now remember, I had started playing the drums as a kid. And in junior high school, I was in the marching band. I started on cymbals. I really wasn't so good on cymbals, but I got to march around in this really cool red and white outfit. I remember the shoes were specific, called white bucks. You had to have special shoes, and I played the cymbals. The next year, I got to play the tenor drum. Tenor drum is basically a tom-tom. If you know what a drum set is, you have the bass drum or kick drum, you have the snare, and you have the tom-toms. So I got to play the tom-tom with mallets. Now here's the thing about playing drums. When I learned how to play drums, I learned traditional grip. Your left hand held the stick one way and the right hand another way, such as all the drummers before. Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Sammy Davis Jr., they all played with traditional grip, as did Tom Petty's first drummer, Stan Lynch. He also played traditional grip. However, when you look at most drummers now, And going back to Ringo Starr, they play match grip. They hold sticks the same way. I could play traditional and I could play match grip too. And I got to play the tenor drum. We would march in parades or at games, or we would compete in competitions. Now, my junior high was all white. Our marching band was all white, which wasn't weird for the area. But I remember the all-black band from Chester. Chester, also just outside of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a multicultural city. You have areas like South Philly where mainly Italians are. Then you have West Philly, North Philly, Northeast, or the great Northeast Philly, which is up near Bucks County, which was a very wealthy county. And then you have Center City. Now, back to marching. We would just march in a straight line, standing up straight down the street in a parade in the competitions. However, the Chester marching band was amazing. They didn't just march. They danced, they wiggled, they strutted, they got down, and they won most of the competitions. So other than being in the marching band, junior high was pretty basic. I had all the basic classes. Oh, there was one class I had. It was an English class. And the teacher was a pedophile. Yeah, a pedophile. You see, what would happen is if you were disruptive in class, he would have you stay after, then put your hands against the desk and kind of spread your legs like a cop was frisking you. Not that I've ever been frisked. And he would take a pointer, which is a long stick about 3 feet long, and it was with a black tip on the end, and they would use it at a blackboard and point to certain things instead of their finger. So he would use it to beat you or smack you on your butt. And then the rest of us would be outside the class looking through this window, which was about 6 feet high and 1 or 2 feet wide next to the door, laughing. Well, it turns out this teacher, and he was a big guy, I mean, really big guy with a pockmarked face, kind of longish black hair, and one of those big mustaches. He would invite certain boys to his apartment, and the boys would talk about how cool his apartment was and had this great flag on the wall. Well, it turns out he was molesting some of those boys. And no, I never got invited. So, good for me. Also, junior high was where you took PE or gym class, and it was the first time as a kid you took a shower with other kids after gym class. And that was my first exposure to taking a shower with other boys I didn't even know. One of the cool things in junior high was shop class. We had wood shop, where you would make wood items, but then there was metal shop, and I got to make whiskey bottle lamps. You see, you would take an old whiskey bottle from your father. My father drank whiskey, so I would bring in a glass whiskey bottle and make a lamp out of it. And it was really cool looking, and I made quite a few of them. Oh, one thing I should mention. My mother being a nurse, she worked at a hospital, she worked at a nursing home, and she worked at a prison as a prison nurse. More on that later. Growing up white. It's weird, but what an adventure.